wanting to play that same game. What's if you're Nate McMillan, if you're the front office of the Pacers, if you're Oladipo, if you're the leaders of the Pacer team, how do you make that goal happen? How do you get past some really good teams to get past the first round of the playoffs?
I think the main sort of goal that would need to be met would it sounds kind of cliche, but there are times right now with the way they run the offense where guys are just pounding the air out of the ball a little bit. And, Victor Oladipo is still finding himself as well, and he's going to have to sacrifice. Before last night's game, he was taking like 0.49 field goal attempts per minute, and that was by far the highest on the team. And that's just not something that the Pacers really need for him while he's still trying to, find himself. So I feel like really buying into moving the basketball would be the biggest attribute they really, could have heading into the playoffs to really maximize their chances.
Well, let's go out west. Obviously, the Lakers, I know this is an old story, but not really old, but it's still just a story that looms over the Lakers, but the death of Kobe Bryant. Let's talk about the death of Kobe Bryant for a moment. Didn't have a chance to have you on when that happened. I know that happened a few weeks ago. But what are your thoughts about the passing of Kobe Bryant? And then we'll get into the West and the LA Lakers and the Nuggets and some other good stories out there in the West.
Yeah, for sure. I think the situation was a terrible crash and all that stuff. And I think the most interesting part of it is just the amount of people who've kind of like outpoured support, for the Bryant's family, and just showing what he meant to them was really interesting to see, because you don't really hear a lot of that. Like those stories when someone is still alive, and it seems like almost every day you still hear more stories of his impact, and I think that's the sort of a really kind of interesting thing to think about. Like maybe when people are still around, we should appreciate them a little bit more, because I feel like the last few years, really the only topics a lot of people talked about were, LeBron's better than him, this player's better than him, and then not really appreciating the impact that he had.
Well, certainly one of the last tweets that he sent out was toward LeBron, and LeBron breaking his record. I'm sorry, of most points scored. Sorry, I had a brain fart there for a minute. I think that may have been the very last tweet that he sent out publicly. I'm not sure about that. But the Lakers, you always hear in situations like this across the thing. This one's for who? This one's for her. So this one, the Lakers will say this win is for Kobe, and there were so many tributes across the NBA to Kobe. As far as the points and how they did things with the NBA All-Stars, but the Lakers are number one in the West. Now, we want to say, okay, well, they're just playing good basketball, but how much of this momentum going forward is this one for Kobe?
I do think it's definitely an extra, layer of motivation, without a doubt. I think when you're already that high in the standings and you have that extra motivation, that definitely adds, like that extra layer to it whenever you're going out there and competing, for sure.
Well, there's another team out in the LA area in the West is number 3, and that's the Clippers. And man, we could have a freeway battle, if you will, there, an A1 battle, whatever you want to call it, between the Lakers and the Clippers in the playoffs.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the Clippers heading into the season were already, quite strong with their, superstar duo with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and they already had, strong supporting cast of role players. But, they just added Marcus Morris. They keep, they added Reggie Jackson as well. I think, it's going to be very tough to stop the Clippers with all of their, playmakers, on their team. And it was interesting because the Lakers could have really used Reggie Jackson, and I don't think the Clippers necessarily had the biggest need for him. And he kind of signed there because he's friends with Paul George. And I think that could end up hurting the Lakers a little bit because Rajon Rondo, I feel like almost every time the Lakers play, I see a lot of people talking about on my Twitter timeline, like, please get Rondo off the court. So I think that acquisition could have really helped the Lakers.
Grant, we talk about the Pacers, and we certainly think that the Pacers can go deep into the playoffs and just kind of get some things together. They got to start working a little bit more cohesively, and things have got to come together a little bit better. And they got to start doing it now. And this is we're past the All-Star, so now it's time. Not that the other games didn't count, but they really start to count now. The dark horse in the West is the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, I think they can definitely make an interesting playoff series in the first round. The only tricky part for the Grizzlies will be just that they have to face such a good team in the first round that they probably won't be able to get past that round, but they'll at least show why, they're such a team for the, years to come as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move on over to the NFL. I know you do a lot with the Indiana sports coverage. We'll talk a little bit about the Colts. It's kind of like a card game where you draw a card, lay a card down, draw a card, lay a card down. Let's talk about the quarterback situation with the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, Jacoby Brissett had a roller coaster season. The Colts might really like Jacoby Brissett. They might go after the draft. There's one card, drop it down, pick it up. Another cards in your hand would be Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, Phillip Rivers, or Jordan Love. Those are the other cards in your hand. Which ones do you discard? Who do you pick up? What do you do?
I think some of the options that are, really up there in age, like a Phillip Rivers, I just don't feel like that would be the best option. I know they have a very strong offensive line, but, I think going for a more youthful option, not necessarily have to be in the draft, but at least like a younger veteran. Like, I do think the idea of a Derek Carr or Matthew Stafford is intriguing. I feel like they played on teams where they really haven't had the best of pieces around them, and having a really strong offensive line would certainly help, especially Matthew Stafford, because he gets beat up so much, when he's in the pocket. And I feel like, I just feel like you can really use your first-round pick for another, offensive weapon as well, like, a CeeDee Lamb or, an option like that to add to having one of those quarterbacks.
Well, and here's the thing is we talked about a little bit earlier on the show with Matthew Hicks. This is when general managers make their money. This is big boy time, and it's not necessarily with the Colts where this is the time of year, especially as you look at free agency. Ballard's not really been one to play around in the free agency pool, but we'll see what happens. And maybe they do draft somebody from like a Jordan Love, or maybe they draft somebody from the draft and kind of put them in the back seat and let Jacoby out there a little bit, and then they've got somebody to move into. Maybe they do that as well. But we got a lot of gaps to put. Let's table the quarterback situation. We know that's the most obvious and most one, but we've got to look at how we've got to look at some other gaps to fill. Let's talk about Anthony Casonzo. Just call him AC. See, I told you your last name wasn't the only one I couldn't pronounce. But AC retires. That's going to create a huge domino fall for the Indianapolis Colts, and they're just going to have to actually basically forget about the quarterback situation. We got to address his replacement. What do you think is going to happen with AC? And if he retires, what do the Colts do?
I do think that I haven't really seen too much about where Costanzo's leaning in terms of his his retirement decision. I do think that drafting a replacement would be a little bit challenging because that's such a pivotal spot of the offensive line that I feel like a veteran that isn't too old would be the best served replacement option in free agency, given that they have so much cap space. I feel like they would be able to pursue that route. Maybe even a trade of some sort, for an offensive lineman that isn't too old would be a good option, because you have to be careful with acquiring players that are kind of getting up there in age, because recently when the Colts were still really patching up their offensive line, I felt like some of those acquisitions that they made with like late round picks for veterans, they didn't work out well at all. And the final product being Andrew Luck getting beat up was definitely not is not really the type of risk that you're going for, like a similar situation. So I think trying to find stability through a proven commodity would probably be the best route.
Well, we're just a few short days away from the NFL Combine here in Indianapolis. We're going to enjoy it for another year or two. Rumor has it they may end up in L.A. I hope they stay in Indianapolis. But the NFL Combine, or the Underwear Olympics, as we like to call it, what are we looking for the Combine? We know two is not going to work out for the Combine. This is a big job interview, but this is also a lot behind the scenes, if you will, that doesn't get a lot of doesn't get any press conference coverage for that matter. But one of the big components of the NFL Combine is the medical screening. How are they healthy wise, and the psychological stuff, and a lot of stuff going behind. Besides the fact that how much their arches, or how fast they can run, or their 40-meter dash speed, or all that stuff that we see on the NFL Network during the coverage of the NFL Combine here in Indianapolis. But it's also a time where team owners come together. They talk about things. We've got a vote coming up with the CBA. We've got a proposal on the table for 17 games, the neutral sites. That's not going to happen in 2020, but it could happen by 2023, especially with big TV contracts, because really that at the end of the day, that's what they're looking at. And part of this CBA thing is, hey, if you're going to do 17 games, play in a neutral site, we want a little bit more piece of the pie than what we're getting now as far as the Players Association. So round all that up for us over the next couple of days. What's going to be going on?
Yeah, it sounds like the NFL Players Association, the board has to, I think I saw there was a recommendation, like a 6-5 recommendation, that they should not adopt the new CBA, but I think it probably won't pass, given how players already kind of struggle to get through the 16 games, and I think adding another game makes it a little challenging, especially when I don't know the thoughts of a lot of players on international or neutral site games, but I have a feeling that it's probably not the most favorable perception that they hold of that. So having that extra game be a definitive neutral site game, I feel like that probably isn't likely to go well with the players, and with their association voting on it. I feel like they'll probably send that one back to the drawing board.
Grant, now to make sure that I got the right area, are you at Arizona State?
I am, yeah.
Okay, that's what I want to make sure. So we'll give your chance to play the homer card, to play the college card. We got March coming up, March Madness coming up. You got the Oregon State Beavers coming in at 15-1. The Arizona Sun Devils, got it. Arizona Sun Devils at 18-8. What are your thoughts going into March with Arizona State?
I think this is probably the best Arizona State basketball team that they've had in recent years, but I still think they'll end up falling short. I think their ceiling is probably like I think at most the round of 32. They have this weird habit of being able to beat like like the number 3 team in the country early in the year, and then fall flat in the towards the conference tournament, and then ultimately lose in the first round. So I feel like they'll be a little bit better than that, but they're not going to be able to really go far. I'd be happy to be proven otherwise, but I feel like round of 32 is probably their what they're looking at.
Yeah, and then IU might be there too. Real quickly, because I know you do a lot of Indiana sports coverage. What are your thoughts about the return of Bobby Knight to Bloomington a couple weeks ago?
I think it's definitely great to have him back in the building. I think it was I feel like too long, and I think it's good that he was able to get there at some point. It's cool. For a lot of people, to be able to, reminisce on, those successful teams from years ago, and having him in the building definitely helps being able to do that. Just interesting to think about